Good evening and apologies for our earlier technical difficulties. Welcome to MBBC's coverage of the Scottish Holyrood elections. Tonight, we'll be broadcasting the results as they come from polling stations all across Scotland. In this election, there was no exit poll taken, so we will attempt to make predictions based on the last set of polling. We have constituency polls from the 28th of June. However, it is worth noting these polls have a high margin of error, so there is still all to play for. The 28th of June polls show that the Conservatives will be leading in 3 of the first past the post seats. Mid Scotland and Fife, South Scotland have comfortable leads, with North East Scotland showing very narrow Tory lead against the Liberals. The polls also predict the NPS will take Highlands and Islands, the Greens will take Lothian, and Unius will take Central Scotland. They also show that West Scotland and Glasgow are both very close. Both see the SNP scoring very well, leading at 24.7% in Glasgow and in second place with 22.7% in West Scotland against Labour, although the majorities in both are around 2%, so they are too close to call. Since the constituency polls, a further nationwide poll was taken on the 1st of July. Polling all across Scotland, it found that most parties made small gains, with the Conservatives making the largest gain of plus 1% since the 28th, perhaps enough to secure their marginal seat. The Greens also made strong gains, gaining 0.9%. However, it's worth noting this poll is now several days old, so all is still to play for. The National Party did very poorly in the July 1st poll, losing 3.1%, and with it almost half of their voting support, which will make it hard for them to secure the Highlands Island seat they were set to win. So we will be expecting the first result to come in from Mid Scotland at Fife at 6:20. Until then, we will bring in Dunks 11 to discuss the situation with us, in addition to Inferno Plato. Myself, Twisted Newt, and Leechy62 will be hosting for you this evening.
But before we go to the discussion regarding the polling, we will be looking at how Scotland will decide its next 15 MSPs. Scotland uses an additional member system, and 8 of those 15 seats are elected using first past the post. There are 8 electoral regions which is first past the post, ranging from Highlands and Islands, Mid Scotland and Fife, Lothian, West Scotland, Glasgow, Central Scotland and South Scotland. Whoever wins the most votes there wins that seat. There is then the additional member system, in which parties who using a proportional representation system, and parties who win the most votes in that will gain list seats. So now that that has been explained, 7 of those list seats going to parties, 8 going to first past post. Now that has been explained, we'll now bring in Dunks 11 to begin discussing the latest polls. So we'll begin by discussing national polling. Dunks, how do you think the parties are doing?
Sorry, we had some technical issues there. I shall repeat the question for Dunks. Dunks, how do you think the poll's going, especially for the classical Liberals? Dunks, we appear to be having further technical issues. Can someone go and hit the recording software with a spanner for us? No, we don't appear to have Dunks, so
okay.
we do have Inferno Plato though instead. So Inferno, what's your take on the situation?
My take on the polls?
Yes, on the polls. They have predicted the Conservatives will do very well with classical Liberals, Greens, Labour. Sorry. Oh, we now have Dunks. We've got the 2 of you now. Excellent. So let's go to Inferno Plato first. What's your take on the situation?
I mean, the polls I'd say are pretty accurate at the moment. However, I would say that I think they may be underestimating Scottish Labour due to their what can I say, almost alternative to the RSP.
So you think they fought a good campaign, do you?
Yeah, I certainly do. And since they're the only almost unionist voice on the left, you can certainly see where they'll attract voters.
Dunks, what's your position?
Well, it's very hard to tell, this being the inaugural election, but I'd say it looks about right from what I've seen on the campaign trail, so we'll see.
Are you concerned that the classical Liberals have failed to win any first past the post seats? They're only there on a top up from the list.
No, that's the point of the list system. It was always going to be hard for us to make a breakthrough in this election because every other party has a base from the general election. We don't have that. So it was always going to be hard, but I'll be forever proud of my party even if we do fail at this last hurdle.
Okay, and in Inferno Plato, you were discussing Scottish Labour. Which first past the post seat could you see them winning?
I don't think they're actually going. If they're going to win the first past the post seat, I'd say it was somewhere near the south, so around what the polling results suggest.
West Scotland appears to be the polling result, which Labour will claim that's their leader, Vending Machine King. He appears to be winning in that seat by around about 2%.
Yeah, so if they're going to win, they've really got to win that.
It is worth pointing out, though, that the error of margin of error for these is around 7%. So it is difficult to tell. It could well be that Labour are, in fact, not going to win their seat and may, in fact, have to rely on a list seat to seat their leader.
And another thing is the overhang seats. It might not just be 15 seats at the end of the night. It might be 16 or 17, depending on how things go.
It's an exciting evening.
It is indeed. And we are expecting our first result from Scotland and Fife in approximately 10 minutes or so, and they're busy counting the votes at Kirkcaldy in Mid-Scotland and Fife, and that is due to go Conservative. So Dunks 11 will bring you on and we can discuss Mid-Scotland and Fife. How do you think that your campaign's gone there specifically?
Well, we've had a very strong and active campaign in Mid-Scotland and Fife, doing a lot of events. I've been doing we had the Classical Liberals Town Hall there, we had the campaign launch there, we had a hell of a lot there. So at the end of the day, it was going to be hard for us to win it, but we'll see how things are going at the count.
Indeed, and it's very close between the Classical Liberals and the Conservatives. So it's the two top parties there, the Classical Liberals and the Conservatives. Does that suggest that Mid-Scotland and Fife could potentially be a libertarian region?
That's hopefully what's suggested. I mean, it'd be nice if we could have like two libertarian parties at the top and preferably the not so nice parties at the bottom. But
perhaps you could declare independence from the rest of Scotland.
Yeah, we'll create a Republic of Mid-Scotland and Fife.
And Inferno Plato, you're obviously ex-Conservative Prime Minister. Your party in the polls appear to be winning there. What are your thoughts on that constituency?
I think you was going about how close it was. I think we need to put into perspective the latest poll in the constituency showed Leachy at 30.6% and Dunn's way down in 16.3%. So that's
7% margin of error before manifestos.
7% margin of error and a 15-point difference to make. So, if it's a margin of 7 upwards, you've still got a long way to climb to get there. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but, the campaign really, the Classical Liberal campaign must have been really good to win that seat.
We'll see how things go in approximately 8 minutes.
Well,
indeed.
It looks, Inferno, that your party is going to be in a very strong position. Do you see your party taking up government in Scotland?
Absolutely. I mean, when you have the top 4 parties, it's very impressive the fact that they're still gaining. We're still gaining whilst in government. And I can certainly see another government, a Tory government in Holyrood by the end of the night.
Indeed. And perhaps we'll move on to another constituency. Then we're expecting either Glasgow or potentially North East Scotland after Mid-Scotland and Fife in approximately 7 minutes or so. So will we discuss Glasgow then? Obviously very, very tight between the SNP, Greens and potentially Labour in third place. Dunks 11, what are your thoughts on that constituency?
It's obviously quite a nationalistic constituency, quite left-wing. I mean, it's Glasgow, what do you expect? But it looks to be a very interesting battleground and a key bellwether of how the nationalists do there, because if they can't win that, then I don't think they can win anywhere.
Do you think that a good showing for the nationalists tonight will be a mandate for another referendum?
Not a chance. Scotland said no in 2014. That mandate still stands.
So is there any circumstance in which another referendum could be called, in your opinion?
It's time for Scotland to move on from the division of let's talk about second referendums and independence. It's time to put a government in Holyrood which will focus on making things better for the people rather than focusing on party political point scoring in favour of their desired constitutional position.
Yeah. And perhaps just before we go to Mid-Scotland and Fife, we'll have time for one last constituency. Perhaps we'll look at something slightly different, the SUP versus Green race in central Scotland. That's a pretty polarised constituency. Will the SUP prop up the Tories, or could the Greens perhaps use this constituency to further a potential First Minister bid? What are your thoughts on Inferno Plato?
I mean, I think the Greens bid for First Minister will be dealt a blow today. I mean, I think we've all seen the viral video of Contraband lambasting Labour and whatnot. So I don't think Labour or many other parties will be willing to put the Greens into power in Holyrood when there are bitter divisions in Westminster like that.
Yep. And Dunks, what would you say about this? Obviously, the polarisation is a key thing. The SGP and Greens obviously very different. What do you think about Central Scotland in terms of going forward?
It's obviously a very divided community and constituency. You've got the Greens, the progressive nationalists on one hand, and you've got the quite more traditional SGP on the other. So I think it's a real mark for the division we see in Scotland today, when you've got such a strong division between one of the more left-wing nationalist parties and the most right-wing unionist party. And it's a real bellwether, it's a real indicator of how we need to move forward instead of focusing on this division on the constitution. Because if we don't do that, then all we'll see is the ultranisation, and we'll get to a point where we've got like Sinn Féin and the DUP, but with the Greens being Sinn Féin equivalently and the NUP being the DUP equivalently.
Yep, and that it will be a unique constituency to watch. That's one of the later constituencies we're expecting, probably roughly 7:30. We'll be looking at that to come in. But another unique thing we're doing this election results programme is we're monitoring Twitter and how the parties are reacting to that, a fairly new thing for elections. So the MHoC Scottish Greens are tweeting about how Electrofolk, that's their obviously candidate for Lothian, he's making his way to the Royal Highland Centre for the count. We've got the Classical Liberals thanking their supporters and campaigners. So all the parties looking forward to these results, obviously, and we expect more tweets throughout the night from the various parties.
I mean, perhaps important will be the ones who aren't making such a big fuss of this night. So you have those in the NPS, National Party of Scotland, the RSP, or the Scottish Radical Party. So parties like that who aren't making such a big deal of these election results may find themselves in a weaker position by the end of the night, and indeed further in the term when they're working out the legislation they want to get passed.
And that's perhaps something we want to discuss. The NPS and the Scottish Radical Party obviously didn't submit manifestos, didn't attend a lot of the debates. Is this something that's going to have a very detrimental effect upon them in fair play to or Dunks?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, it shows a real contempt for the people and the electorate when you don't bother to show up to your debates, you don't submit your manifesto. It's taken for granted, and I hope that the people have seen right through that and told them where to go.
I do think it'll have an impact on the election. So the Highlands and Islands, for example, where the NPS were projected to get the 27.7% of the vote against the Lib Dems 22%. I think not submitting a manifesto will do them real damage there. And I do see that constituency turning yellow.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think we can probably go to Kirkcaldy in the next minute or so to hear what the returning officer has to say for the Mid Scotland and Fife constituency. Are we ready?
They haven't declared quite yet, although they do say they will be with us very shortly. So in the next couple of minutes, they're just counting the last few boxes. The sixth formers are clearly very hard at work in Mid Scotland and Fife. They've got the
must have been bust up.
Yep. Okay. So if we have a little moment or so, perhaps we could discuss Lothian, that key seat between the Tories and the Conservatives in more detail. What will that seat sort of epitomise for the night?
I'm sorry, are you sure about that? Tories and Conservatives? Lothian, isn't that Greens and Tories?
Greens and Tories, apologies there. Dunks, perhaps?
I would just mention the Monolith did quite an article on this where the Tories were focusing a lot of their efforts in Lothian when it turned out that they may have a chance to get Purple Slug into Holyrood. So I do think it'll be quite a close race between the two.
Yes, the polling was predicting a strong Green lead, but that was quite old polling, so a lot could have changed by now.
I mean, absolutely. And normally, if it was, for example, against somebody who hadn't submitted a manifesto, I would say the Conservatives may have had it. However, it also ran a strong campaign. And certainly, MG has been busy, hard at work on the national campaign stage. So, it's all a coin flip, really.
Indeed. And there's obviously been a lot of senior national Conservative leaders and senior figures in the party making speeches. For example, the Prime Minister was in Lothian, as well as the ex-Prime Minister, Conservative Prime Minister was there. So that could obviously have a big impact upon Lothian, and obviously Leachy did his final rally in Lothian, so clearly a key target for the Conservatives, and if they win that could suggest a very good night for them.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interject here because we have just found out that the declaration is imminent from Mid Scotland and Fife. We will now go to the returning officer who is about to declare the result.
I, the returning officer for the Mid Scotland and Fife constituency in the Scottish parliamentary election held on the 6th of July 2017, hereby give notice that the total number of ballots cast in said constituency was as follows: 61,478. Oh, no, I've got this wrong. We have an error.
Okay, we're back with you in the studio. There appears to be some issues at Mid Scotland and Fife.
Yep.
Yes, that's taxpayers' money's going well in hand there.
Indeed. Yeah. Perhaps we could
dear.
just I think we'll just discuss perhaps another constituency then, and just to make a note there that discussing that result will be Dunks 11, and we'll bring back Inferno Plato for Glasgow later on. So perhaps preemptively, Dunks, what are you thinking for Mid Scotland and Fife? Just even more detail. Perhaps third place. Will the Liberal Democrats clinch third?
I don't know. It's really hard to tell here on the ground. It's very close in terms of the ballot boxes. So we'll see what happens very shortly when the returning officer can declare.
We will indeed. Is there anything you wanted to add in Inferno Plato?
Not really, no.
Okay.
Right, I believe we're getting back to the constituency. They've sorted out whatever's gone wrong there. So we're going to take you back to the constituency, and hopefully we can get the results this time.
The result as follows: Real Nye Bevan, Scottish Radical Party, 11,410. Rosup 008, Scottish Greens, 17,188. Dr. 529, Scottish Labour, 18,515. Wired Cookie 1, Scottish National Party, 21,211. 11. Scottish Liberal Democrats, Al Pointy, 42,864. Classical Liberals, Dunks 11, 38,179. Scottish Conservative and Unionist, Leachy 62, 104,342. Scottish Unionists, that Perth fan, 19,809. I therefore give notice that Leachy 62 is duly elected as Member of the Scottish Parliament for Mid Scotland and Fife.
So we're back with you in the studio, and it's a very strong showing for the Conservatives, who have gained that seat compared to the general election from the Scottish Nationalist. Leachy has done very well there, with a Conservative majority of 61,478, which I'm sure will may well push them on towards gaining a list seat later on in the evening. We also see that Dunks has been knocked into third place narrowly by the Liberal Democrats, who have beat the Classical Liberals by around 4,000 votes. We also see quite a weak showing for the Scottish Nationalists, so perhaps a sign for things to come later in the evening.
Yep, really fascinating result actually from Mid Scotland and Fife. Could quite sums up how the rest of the night could potentially go. The Conservatives doing very well there with a large majority over the Classical Liberals. Classical Liberals even pushed into third place, something I don't think many people were expecting. Dunks, what would you have to say about that? What do you think?
Well, I mean, as I said at the start of the evening, it was always going to be hard for us to build a vote here, take it first time, because the Tories and Lib Dems, they've stood in this constituency before, and they know they've got a base here. But I mean, to beat the Scottish Nationalists, to beat the SUP, to beat all the established parties, barring two, and to come third is still a quite good result, given we were only formed 3 months ago.
I think so. Is there anything you wanted to add in there? I'll just check Twitter one moment. Do you want to add anything in there, Nuke?
Well, it's It's an interesting start, although we have to remember the Conservatives were polling very well in Mid Scotland and Fife. I believe they had a 10-point lead in the last constituency polls on the 28th of June, and since then they only served to make further gains nationally. So, although this is a strong Conservative showing, I don't think we can take it to be a bellwether for the rest of the evening, because this was a very strongly Conservative constituency even from the beginning of the race.
However, it does almost like influence the national race, so to speak, because you'd never expect the Lib Dems to do as well as they did, really, would you?
Yes, we could well see the prophesised Lib Dem surge.
I mean, in our talks, we barely even mentioned Lib Dems in the context of Mid Scotland. So you could say them doing well is actually an indicator of the national campaign tonight.
But Inferno, a very good showing for your party.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, if we lost here, I'd be very disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. It is quite something, and the something really interesting, I think, is the green result here, 17,000. It's where were they in the polling on the 28th? I believe they were higher up than that. That's something I don't believe we were expecting to see. Is that potentially something that they could concern them for Lothian?
Well, I don't really think so. It's a target constituency seat. They've been putting a lot of effort into winning Lothian, and really, Mid Scotland and Fife, although we polled higher, it was never really a target constituency for us. So I can just imagine that with all our efforts being elsewhere, other seats have had to suffer, unfortunately.
So does this show that perhaps the Greens have had too fine a focus on their target constituencies and haven't remembered to campaign well throughout the rest of Scotland?
I wouldn't say that either, though, because I think, well, Emma, who was standing in that seat, performed very well on Holyrood debates, both debates, in fact.
Yeah, she did come across quite strongly in the debates, although it appears it wasn't quite enough to win over Mid Scotland and Fife.
Obviously not fans of enforced vegetarianism.
Oh, here we go.
Of course, at the end of the day, I think trying to win a seat that is typically very unionist as a nationalist party is ultimately futile, as you're going to come up short. But I don't think it'll affect us in more nationalist constituencies, such as Lothian.
So, Dunks, do you think that the Classical Liberals will show a stronger showing throughout the rest of the country?
Well, I mean, I hope so. It's hard to tell right now, but I mean, as I said before, we were formed 3 months ago. We are competing against parties with a membership 30 times the size of our own. At the end of the day, I will be extremely proud of my party if we get a seat alone, and hopefully we'll be able to beat some of the established names and build a strong base for both the general election here and the next Holyrood election.
Well, your party could well be on the way to a list seat. You haven't done badly, although it's quite clear that the Conservative majority had annihilated you. It's larger than even the next follow-up party's total vote.
Yeah, very strong seat for the Tories, and I would obviously congratulate Lecce when he gets around to finishing all his press rounds. I imagine he's doing right now as the first MSP to be returned. But look,
he's got out the old champagne a bit.
Probably. But at the end of the day, we ran a strong campaign across Scotland, and nobody can fault that.
I mean, may I point out that this actually may be almost like penalising Dunks himself, because as we know, he's an MP in Cumbria who fought on local issues. So perhaps the people of Mid Scotland and Fife thought, no, we don't want that, and it's not an indicator of the national picture.
Very true, and that's something to consider with every constituency result is there's always these little local factors which will make a difference, how much local parties campaigned there. You can never take one constituency result and say this is the representative of how it's going across the nation.
Indeed. Apologies about that there with my microphone.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you now because we are expecting the declaration of results from Glasgow any moment now. We will now take you over to the returning officer there, who hopefully will be able to read out the results for us.
The number of votes cast was as follows. CCN, Scottish Radical Party, 21,868. Please Don't Yell, Scottish Labour, 41,117. Scottish Greens, Ballag 12, 82,503. Scottish National Party, Ice Cream Sandwich 401, 45,084. Scottish Liberal Democrats, MTFD, 19,853. Classical Liberals, Radio Free Kyrgyzstan, 15,014. Scottish Conservatives, Leafy Emerald, 29,430. Scottish Unionists, Panzerkommandant 24, 28,513. I therefore give notice that Ballag 12 is hereby elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for Glasgow.
And we see another overwhelming result on the seat, perhaps unexpected. The Greens have done very well here at Glasgow, with a stonking majority. We've seen the SNP, who were predicted to be much closer, actually, around 2%, have fallen back quite significantly. Could this perhaps be a showing of what will happen for the rest of the night, where we'll see the SNP diminishing in expected vote?
Well, I think it's very hard to tell, really.
I think these are early constituency results, and we shouldn't take too much from them. But obviously, it's an excellent result for the Green Party. One with Sergio, what do you think about that?
Well, it's easy to say that we've been targeting constituencies throughout the campaign, and ultimately it has paid off, because obviously we're talking about less important constituencies to the Greens, perhaps suffering, but at the end of the day, we came out with a seat that we probably didn't really expect to get, and it's paid dividends. And I know Ballag well, and I know that he's a fantastic young politician. I know for a fact that he'll do brilliantly.
Absolutely, and obviously that's quite an interesting result for Labour. Obviously, I'm not sure exactly where they were polling on the 28th of June, but they're up there with the SNP definitely, because that's something that could suggest for West later in the evening that Vending Machine King could perhaps win his seat at Dunks 11.
I mean, I'm looking at the polls right now, and Labour were fourth in the 28th poll, and they seem to be fourth in this one as well. So Labour was 13.8%, whilst the Greens were 23.6%. So that's the sort of difference we're looking at compared to the polls and the results tonight.
That is very interesting, and obviously the SNP didn't produce a huge manifesto, only 12 pages. Labour, I can remember, was fairly longer than that, within 20 to 30 pages, and policy, and it was quite detailed. Is that
to be fair, they had pictures on every page.
That is true, but is that something that's had an effect, the short SNP manifesto, on the support from Labour?
I don't think the manifesto size have had a significant impact on the race. Most people don't have the time to sit and read a huge manifesto when it comes to voting. So I'd say if it's down to anything, it'll be mostly down to campaign speeches and the presence of the leaders.
Yeah. And perhaps something we can discuss is the fact that the Conservatives came fourth in Glasgow, the SUP in fifth. Is that something that's absolutely going to concern the RSP for the rest of tonight?
I don't think the RSP are here tonight.
Very harsh.
Honestly, I don't think the RSP will be making much of tonight, other than almost commiserating themselves. In all honesty, I don't think they have much of a fight, other than hopefully relying on a list seat.
Again, though, we've seen another poor showing for the classical Liberals. Dunks, are you concerned? Because your candidate, Radio Free Kyrgyzstan, actually polled the lowest out of all of the people in this constituency. Are you concerned?
Well, it was always going to be a hard constituency for us to do well in. It's obviously not the type of demographic which we traditionally appeal to. It's a very nationalistic constituency, which is troublesome for us given our unionist tendencies. But I mean, if you look at the grand picture, we've got 5%. That's us kept our deposit, and in the grand scheme of things, I can expect us to do better across the country later on. This was always going to be the hardest constituency for us to do well in.
Where are you expecting to do well, then?
Well, I mean, if you look at northeast Scotland, there was polling which suggested we could actually win that seat.
Yes, it was a very close marginal. It showed the Tories having a 2% lead over the classical Liberal candidate.
And if you looked at the Highland Polling Company, it actually showed us in the lead. So
that's going to be something to specifically watch out for tonight. Then I think we're expecting, northeast Scotland around about 7 o'clock, perhaps. So
I mean, in fairness to the classical Liberals, they've started from nothing. So to say, where are you going to perform strongly? The simple answer is we don't really know at this stage because they've started from the very bottom, and to win a constituency seat, they have to go to the very top of that region. So I think the most the classical Liberals can really hope for is just to gain a good base and then rely on list seats, because overall that's where they're going to get them, if they're going to get them at all.
well, at the minute we've got absolutely no base across the country, so this election is really the building the foundations for a future election and everything like that.
I'm going to have to interrupt you. We have breaking news from our next seat expected to return. That is West Scotland. West Scotland have said they have had to start a recount because the counting was far too close and they wanted to ensure they got it correct. This is a very close race. West Scotland is the constituency that was a Labour SNP marginal. And they have said that since the votes are so close, they want to run a second counting to ensure that they've got the correct answer.
Well, that's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it just shows how close the race between Labour and Labour and it was a three-horse race there, wasn't it?
Yes, they've also said that the Scottish Unionists have done quite well, but they want to be quite sure that they've got the right result. We are expecting the counting to be completed soon, but there will be a slight delay while they recount.
So the SNP's result in Glasgow potentially not reflected further west in West Scotland. Specifically in for this result, we have Indigo Rollo, the Commons Speaker. What would you like to discuss about West Scotland?
I think it's really interesting because they've switched whoever is winning so often that you can't actually predict who's going to win. I mean, any one party getting an extra constituency, then proportionally that changes the entire parliament. So West Scotland and Lothian, I think, are the seats to watch out for tonight.
It is certainly a very close seat.
It is. And at that, then, we'd like to thank Dunks 11 and Inferno Plato, both ex-Prime Ministers, for being on the show tonight.
Thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Adios.
Okay, so West Scotland has gone to a recount then. So we have more time to discuss that. The SUP vote there is also quite interesting. What do you think the factors influencing an SUP vote there could be, Indigo Rollo?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
So the SUP polling quite highly in a constituency which is torn between progressive parties, Labour and the SNP. The SUP just sneaking in third place. Is that something interesting? And where are these social conservative values coming from?
I think it just shows that the constituency is incredibly divided, and I think the fact is it's not so much voters, say, switching from the Green Party to the Scottish Unionist. I think it's more like getting the vote out and the Scottish Unionists being able to run a good campaign and make sure that their supporters do actually turn out and vote. So I think turnout is going to be the biggest contributing factor to who wins the constituencies.
Do you think there's a degree of tactical voting going on here, where, say, Unionists who are concerned that the SNP may take the seats might decide to go, oh, well, I could live with Labour?
I think there is an element of that, yeah. And also, this is, I think, the first election where we've seen parties actually standing aside in favour of other parties. So, for instance, in the Highlands, we've seen the classical Liberals standing aside in favour of the Liberal Democrats, and that's probably going to have a very big impact there. Curiously enough, there hasn't been as much standing aside in West Scotland and Lothian, which are the contested constituencies, you might put. So I think perhaps by the end of the evening, there'll be a couple of parties who will be kicking themselves over that if that does change the balance of power.
So would you perhaps be suggesting that the Greens perhaps endorsed the SNP there? Because Labour obviously have been staunchly unionist. I'm not sure if people heard a few of Vending Machine King's interviews, but he seemed very staunchly unionist. He was fighting for the progressive unionist vote, and he's obviously contesting that hard. So could the Green vote make the difference here?
I think it easily could, yeah.
Right, I must interrupt you now because we have a declaration imminent from West Scotland. They say they have finished their recount. So now we will leave the studio and go over to the returning officer there, who will be declaring the results.
I hereby give notice that the votes are as follows. Scottish National Party, Deladio, 62,380. Scottish Radical Party, the Emilary Best, 9,508. Scottish Labour, Vending Machine King, 71,895. Scottish Liberal Democrats, Rick Call 12, 14,890. Classical Liberals, Red Wolf 177, 23,722. Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, Ganderloin 46,352. Scottish Unionists, Unknown User 717, 62,399. I therefore give notice that Vending Machine King is duly elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for the West Scotland constituency.
So it's confirmed Labour has managed to secure their seat. Very close result. You can see the SNP and Scottish Unionist almost having exactly the same vote share, down to a handful of voters in difference. And again, a poor showing for the Classical Liberals. This is interesting. This is a very marginal constituency, and I suspect that in the next election it will be one to watch.
It will. I mean, Vending Machine has run a really strong campaign. He's really brought Labour from the bottom up, really. Brand new politician, new to the Scottish political scene, but clearly someone that West Scotland have supported. Oh, I'm just noticing how close the SNP and SUP result is. That's really close. But certainly something potentially worrying for the SNP. They've been on Twitter. So they're saying that the SNP led the left in Mid Scotland and Fife. They're congratulating the Greens in Glasgow, something potentially to look out for with potential coalitions within the next few days. And a close second place they're calling Glasgow. Are the SNPs actually doing as well as they seem to be claiming to do on Twitter, Indigo Rolo?
I think it's too early to tell because I think constituencies this election have paid particular attention to which members they're actually electing, because they get 2 votes this election. They get votes for a member of the Scottish Parliament to represent their constituency and a party as a whole. So I think constituency politics can be very unpredictable when looked at national level. So really, time will tell, but the SNP are going to have to hope for good list seats, I think.
Yes, well, it looks like the SNP could be well on track to gaining a list seat, because they did very well in the previous constituency of Glasgow. They're going, I think it's close second, and plus this, I'd say definitely they'll be on track for a list seat.
Yeah.
So we may well see a strong independence grouping within the Scottish Parliament. It'd be very interesting to see that.
Perhaps that would be something very interesting. I'm just hearing from northeast Scotland, where we're expected to get a result, that theirs is taking a little longer. We're expecting it roughly about 7 o'clock.
Perhaps the sixth formers are getting tired.
Perhaps. So we can now bring in Alexion, who's the classical liberal MSP candidate for there. We'll just add him in just now. Alexion, can you hear us?
No, we appear to have lost him. Oh, he's dear.
Alexion?
His connections aren't great. Someone needs to invest in Scottish infrastructure, I tell you.
Indeed they do, whoever's next First Minister. Alexion, can you hear us? Can you discuss? One moment. I believe he can discuss with us. He's just having slight technical issues. So, Nuke, how do you think the Conservative vote in this constituency is going? I mean, it's quite interesting to see them fourth in a constituency like this, where they weren't polling too highly. Is that something to look out for, perhaps Lothian in South Scotland later tonight?
It is quite possible. We'll just have to wait and see. But I suspect what we'll see and what the polling indicated is we'll probably see the Conservatives doing quite well in a few first-past-the-post constituencies and perhaps picking up a list seat as well. Because they were projected 2 very strong wins and there was 1 marginal of the Classical Liberals. The Classical Liberals haven't been showing too well this evening, so it's quite possible they could win that as well. We'll just have to wait and see.
Perhaps.
It's equally interesting, the Scottish Radical Party, who have done very poorly indeed. They've only got about as much as the Labour majority, which isn't surprising for a party that didn't manage to put out a manifesto in the end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's clearly going to be a very tearful evening for them.
It is. And I wonder, Lexion, are you having any technical issues, or can you hear us? I don't believe you can.
He's definitely not with us. We've lost him.
That's fine.
It's interesting to note, actually, that also we see Rick Cool doing quite well. Rick Cool was the famous UKIPper who had lost his Eurosceptic gander, perhaps we could say, and defected to the Liberal Democrats. So perhaps that's a condemnation of disloyalty there. We'll just have to see.
Perhaps. And I think we have Alexion in the studio. Can you hear us, Alexion?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Excellent, we can indeed. So
some very difficult connections there from your potential constituency there, Alex.
Well, it's the northeast. What can I say, really?
Oh dear.
So
how's it going there?
Yeah, it's looking good. I think. I think it's gonna be close, but we were always in for a fight on our hands.
Yes, your constituency is projected to poll within 10 minutes. So yes, they're finishing the counting. I hope you haven't been helping.
I haven't actually. I haven't been allowed anywhere near it. I think there's been a lot of fuss about our results so far. I don't think we've done that badly. Dunks performed slightly worse than he was polling, but only by 2%. And RFK got around what we expected. So I'm optimistic.
If the Classical Liberals have a strong position, do you think you'll try and aim for government?
It depends which government. It absolutely depends which government. I mean, we've categorically ruled out any sort of coalition with the Scottish Unionist Party because they go against a lot of our values, and we don't believe that we should be working with a party like that. In terms of other parties, I mean, we'd be open to a lot of different things. The only thing I can say is there will be no coalition involving both us and the SUP.
Would you be open to perhaps moderate left-wing parties who may well fill up the gap you need if you want a coalition with the SUP? That may well knock out the chances of a broad right coalition.
I think that it depends how left. I mean, personally, I'd be very open to any sort of coalition talks with the Liberal Democrats, who are sort of centre left. I think potentially if the trend continues and Labour continue performing so well, it will have to be something we think long and hard about. The decision is not going to be easy by any means, but at the same time, with such a close election, you can't really just sit there, jam your fingers in your ears and ignore everyone. And to some level, there will have to be compromises made.
Are there any circumstances under which you would vote for a Labour First Minister, do you think?
I think that's a lot harder to justify. I can't really see any circumstances unless if it was the case that Labour had a notable majority in the event of any sort of coalition. For example, if Labour had, say, 6 seats, then it would be difficult to justify to the population why we wouldn't support that, because obviously if they've well outperformed other parties to such an extent, then they probably deserve it. But I don't think they necessarily will. So I can't see it happening. I think far more likely is there will be, I think, I'm personally predicting a Conservative First Minister, but we will have to see.
So what would be your dream situation in terms of government and First Ministership?
The dream would be classical Liberal majority.
If we're a slightly more realistic dream, I should have used different words there. Your
course.
very down to earth and boring dream. What would that be?
Of course. My dream coalition would be the Conservatives, Classical Liberals, and Liberal Democrats. I think three parties complement each other in a lot of different ways. And I think that some of the more right-wing members of the Conservatives would be kept in check quite well by us and the Liberal Democrats. However, I do know and could imagine why the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives may be somewhat uneasy with working together in coalition, but we'll have to see what happens.
It's looking like it could be a really hung parliament. Would you consider voting for a compromise candidate as First Minister?
I mean, again, it all depends on how much of a compromise it is. Compromise, I won't vote for an SNP or Green Party First Minister, if that's what you're asking, under any circumstances. Likewise, I won't be voting for an SUP First Minister, because they're so ideologically separate from our party that it would be absurd to do that.
Okay. I think, yeah, we're still waiting for North East Scotland to come in. I think that
Not
might
enough
be
schools
close,
there, clearly.
Indeed, yeah. All the sixth formers slacking off. What are we doing? Whoever's the
I
next
What's
MSP
wrong with
up
this
there,
country? We need a party that will bring back, I don't know, very big whips for them.
I think that's UKIP you're looking for if you're looking for a party which is going to bring back whipping.
Why don't you ask your leader? He used to lead them.
Well, there was a particular member who I'm not going to name, but he was more into that sort of thing than I think Dunks was.
And I think we should change the subject rather quickly. Otherwise, we may well get in trouble with Ofcom if you're not careful. Then we really will get a whipping.
Right. I think perhaps we could discuss. We're expecting South Scotland on after North East, because we're waiting 8 minutes or so, obviously. What do you think could happen down there, Alexion?
This is the projected
Conservatives
Tory
leading.
win. Reasonably safe. Not quite as marginal as North East Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, so far I think it's been a quite surprising night so far. So I am a little bit uneasy to make rash statements. I think the Tories will win South Scotland, without necessarily saying I'm confident they will, but I think I'd say it's more likely than not that they will walk away with it. And it's, I mean, credit where it's due, the Conservatives. I don't think in a lot of constituencies. I mean, I know they haven't in North East Scotland. I know they haven't just been sat there sitting on their laurels, working on the fact that they have a majority in some seats. They've been out there working a very active campaign. So I think they've got a very, very good chance.
Yeah, and the SNP candidate for South Scotland was pretty critical of the Conservatives. There, he was complaining about bank closures, school closures. Will that have put the population off, or could it rally some of them behind the SNP down there?
The problem is, I think any sort of criticism, just or not, which the SNP may have levelled towards the Conservatives, won't necessarily drive Conservative voters into the hands of the SNP. What it's more likely to do is it's going to drive them into the hands of other parties, more moderate parties, the Liberal Democrats or Labour.
So we could see a splitting of the vote.
I think so. I think it's going to be more narrow than expected, but we've seen that all night, really. So time will tell. I think this constituency, North East Scotland, is probably the biggest two-horse race, if you like, at least according to the polls, whereby it's seen as unlikely that any other party is really going to have a chance. But it's been pretty close across the board so far.
Do you think you'll win it?
I think I have a good chance. I don't know if I will win it. I mean, obviously, as Dunk said earlier, very rightly so, we don't have a base to work on in Scotland, unlike a lot of the other parties. But I think we've put in a very good campaign, and the polls are showing very close. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, Indigo Rule, was there something you wanted to add in here?
Pardon? Can you repeat that?
So, no, Indigo Rule, did the common speaker have anything you wanted to add there? I think he did.
Sorry, what were you referring to?
Did you have something to add in there? A question to ask Alexa on there?
Oh no, I think I've quizzed him enough.
Okay, perfect.
That's good.
So-
I've got my grilling for the day.
So 5 minutes or so we're expecting. I'm just going to check the Twitter accounts of the various parties. The SNP Greens very happy about SNP Greens. Scottish Greens very happy about their win in Glasgow. They've got a picture up. SNP commenting on their third position in West Scotland, only 19 behind second. They're noting. But is it something to look at for the SUP? Because they're coming second in West Scotland. What could that mean for Central Scotland election?
I think they've got a good chance. I mean, the SUP obviously they were on to win Central Scotland regardless. According to the polls, I think the result we saw a few minutes ago was quite shocking in that regard. But yeah, I can't really see. I mean, just looking at the polls now, the nearest party to them is the Green Party, and according to the last poll, there is, by my count, an 8% or so margin. Even with the margin of error, you've got to say that the SUP have to be fairly confident about their chances.
It's a pretty polarising debate because it's Central Scotland is seeing SUP versus Green, which is pretty much the most conflicting two parties you could possibly have.
The lesser of two evils, yeah. Well, at least for me.
Which would you say is the lesser of two evils?
I'd probably waste the ballot if it was only those two. Exercise the right to vote, but I think they're both very bad in their own way. Yeah, I really couldn't choose between them, to be honest.
I mean, what we could well see if the SUP win it is, even if they won't do a formal coalition with the Tories, you may well find in First Minister bid that they may well end up propping up the Tories simply because they'd want to avoid having a left-wing First Minister. So while they've ruled out formal coalitioning, we could well see a potential, not quite a supplying confidence, but one step below it, arrangement where there'd be an expectation that they would vote through certain pieces of legislation. And indeed, the First Minister.
I think regardless of the results tonight, we're going to end up with, I'm predicting, a rather weak government, and a government which will have to be very careful and not do anything too insane.
Well, you have to be careful what you're saying there. You might be in it.
I might well be. With any luck, I will. I'll be able to win my seat or win the list seat, and will be able to enter Holyrood. But I mean, listen, we'll have to see what happens. But with a weak government, I mean, any coalition will ensure that no major mistakes can be made, which is always nice for me to see. And it means that there can't be any sort of massive reforms on either side, on the far right or the far left.
So you're expecting to be strong and stable and perhaps well in government?
No, not strong and stable. I'm expecting to be weak and unstable, which...
I meant your party specifically with its potential role in any government.
Yeah, our party, I think we're open minded for the most part, with the exception of the far right and far left, who we won't work with. And we really don't want, what the classical liberals don't want is any massive lurch to the far right or far left. We want to stop that, and we want to bring politics back to more the centre and somewhat centre-right grounds.
I think there's something quite unique that in the whole this government's going to be shaky and weak kind of thing, is that there's obviously this kind of Named Persons Act, the offence of pay village football. I think there's a lot of, particularly the unionist parties, who can agree on that and potentially look at a 10-seat majority on those things. So potentially in the first weeks or so, we won't see so much of that weak and wobbly, perhaps as you might want to put it, election, that weak and wobbly government. But instead, we might see strength for the first few weeks and it breaking down when it becomes more partisan in week 3, 4, and beyond.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think there will be some issues, regardless whether we end up with a left-wing government coalition, which I think is somewhat unlikely, just on the basis that if you look at the right or centre-right of the parties running, they're all unionists for the most part, and that is a massive advantage they'll have. But if you look at the left, the SNP and Labour, whether they'll work together in coalition, it will be a very uneasy coalition, to say the least.
Yeah, it will. And I think we can perhaps go to Aberdeen, result from North East Scotland.
Yes, we can now confirm that North East Scotland will be declaring very shortly. We will take you from the studio there now.
As follows: Scottish Radical Party, Sci-Fi Hipster, 8,557. Scottish National Party, JAC P123, 28,654. Scottish Labour, Arthur Dent 24, 10,424. National Party of Scotland, a Green Spaceman, 16,933. Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, Dr. Lancelot, 86,327. Classical Liberals, Alexon, 64,991. Scottish Unionist Party, your Duce was right, 34,216. I therefore give notice that Dr. Lancelot is duly elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for the North East constituency.
Well, yes. We see again a good showing for the Conservatives. Apologies for the technical glitch there, viewers at home. Still working out the bugs in our new system, I'm afraid. Still, though, again, a very strong showing for the Conservatives. It is clearly a good night for them.
Yeah, I'd like to be the first to congratulate Dr. Lancelot. I mean, he obviously put in a great campaign. It's typical that in our two strongest constituencies, we had some of the hardest people to run against, myself and Dunks. But listen, I mean, I'm still very, very happy with our result. When we started here, we were polling 1.8%, I believe, in North East Scotland. And to go from polling under 2% to getting 64,000 votes, I think is nothing to be sniffed at. And I think it's very, very impressive. And I think I can see us getting a list seat tonight, perhaps two, although that's looking unlikely at this point. But listen, it's a great starting platform for us, and it's a base to move off.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's very close between the classical Liberals and the Conservatives there. I know it potentially doesn't look like it, but it is particularly suggesting when the classical Liberals have had not much of a base to start with. It's a good result for them and potentially sets them up for a list seat later in the night. Do you think that's likely to happen, Alexion?
Yeah, I think we're going to get a list seat, in which case I will end up being in Holyrood. I mean, the dream for us was to get 2 seats and to get one list, one first past the post, which obviously now is very unlikely. But yeah, I think we are going to get a list seat, which would be nice. And we'll have to see where we can start from there. I mean, we're a very young party. We've got a lot of room to grow, and we'll have to see where it takes us from here. But I'm optimistic for the future, and congratulations to the Conservatives for pulling off a great campaign in North East Scotland.
Yes, it appears to be another painful seat for the Scottish wing of the RSP. We can see again they're polling around the 9,000 mark, so perhaps this could discount them from being able to pick up even a list seat later on. They clearly have suffered very badly as a result, failing to produce a manifesto. Not exactly a great result for Labour either, who have come underneath a Green Spaceman who, too, his party failed to produce a manifesto. So clearly not the result Labour was hoping for.
Yeah, I think it's a poor result. But again, I did sort of say beforehand I didn't think it would be that close between other parties. I always sort of suspected that I assumed it would be closer, but I thought it would be a Conservative, classical, Liberal battleground, if you'd like. I think Labour and the SRP will be disappointed with themselves, but at the same time, this isn't the most telling constituency, and we have seen them do well elsewhere, so they shouldn't get too down on themselves so far.
Yes, they have already managed to secure the West Scotland seat. Again, though, we see a very good showing for the SNP. They've come a square in the middle, which is not badly at all. So perhaps we could well see them on the way to gain a bench of list seats here.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I'd add is alongside the SNP, the Conservatives are doing well right across the board. I mean, they came 4th in West Scotland, did very well in Glasgow. I think they came 4th as well. So, I mean, is that potentially something that the Conservatives and potentially their supporters, classical Liberals, and potentially the SGP, even Labour, is that something that they'll see as positive? election?
What the performance of the SUP?
The Conservatives. The Conservatives. Is that something the classical Liberals are happy about?
I mean, I'm happier it's the Conservatives, the SNP. I'll say that. We obviously don't see eye to eye with the Conservatives on everything by any means. I think there's a lot more room for coalition with the Conservatives than with a very strong nationalist party like the SNP. So I'm very happy to see that it's, although the public haven't fully turned to us just yet, we're doing well, getting results like 25% in North East Scotland, and just seeing that the top three parties in North East Scotland are all very strong unionists, although the SUP were a bit strong for my liking. It's a very positive show, and I'd much rather it was sort of unionist parties who did well than nationalists.
Yeah, and I think we'll shortly be going to South Scotland. That's the seat which the Scottish candidate appears to be pulling ahead in within the next few minutes. Can you confirm that to us, Danuka? Are your sources saying similar things?
Sorry,
I apologise. We had minor technical issues there. I can indeed confirm that. South Scotland is a very close seat, we understand, between the Conservatives and the SUP, who are generally considered to be leading. It's also had quite an inflammatory SNP candidate, so perhaps we could speak about that.
Yeah, I mean, the candidate there he took a very strong approach. You know, he went to the leaders' debate and he asked the Conservative leader 3 questions, all about specifically South Scotland. It took the moderator to remind him that it wasn't about South Scotland, it was about the National Front, you know, the whole national scene, and he's clearly trying to take out as much as the Conservative vote as possible, but potentially that couldn't work in his favour, and in fact will split the Conservative vote and could increase with the SUP. Is that something which the SNP candidates potentially not thought about election?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think South Scotland, we've done less polling, obviously, there because we're not running, but I think it's going to be very, very close, like everywhere. But, I mean, it should be a fairly firm Conservative win, I say. But you never know. You never know. But I'm happy to say, again, very, very firm unionist seat, which will be nice.
Yeah.
Why are you not running in South Scotland, I ask?
We're not running in South Scotland because we essentially knew that as a small party we had limitations and would rather target specific seats.
So you felt you'd do poorly, basically, in those specific seats if you spread yourself too.
I believe election has to leave us, unfortunately, but I think we can bring in the Conservative candidate for South Scotland, Rory.
Well, I will say to him, if he's still listening, you don't need to worry about polling poorly, because look, the RSP Scottish wing have polled poorly everywhere, and that hasn't got them down.
Indeed, yeah. So Rory, can you hear us? That's the Scottish Conservative candidate for South Scotland.
Perhaps not.
One moment, I think we can just connect to him just now.
Well, an interesting question to ask is South Scotland has quite a strong fishing presence. So, which parties do we think could be best placed to take that farming and fishing vote? I believe we now have Rory with us.
Yeah, we do. But just before Rory can come in on that, that was a question which was specifically asked in the debate.
Hello, yes, we have you with us now.
Yes, sorry about this. First of all, could I just make a small point?
Of course.
Somebody said that this was a close marginal seat between the SUP and the Conservatives, with the SUP in head. That's a complete fake news BBC lie. I'm currently polling.
Oh, that's very mean.
17% ahead. So just wanted to clear that up.
Depends which polls you believe, I suppose. All of the polls are fake news, though. They're all rigs. I mean, believe me.
Yeah, we have to wait
it's
until the final
tremendous.
result.
We all know that the RSP is going to win everything.
But obviously, I mean, clearly the RSP's poor turning has in fact been a result of Russian hacking. We can confirm that the international agent Indigo Rolovic has been seen in faking polls and issuing fake news. It's a tremendous scandal. Believe me.
Bigly.
It is. He has been bigly manipulating the vote. That is quite right.
So, Rory, do you want to answer the question that?
The question originally was
fisheries?
which parties could be best to claim the farming and fishing vote.
Well, I think that obviously I'm going to have to say the Conservative Party. That's because
What a
generally.
surprise.
Yes, I know. Instead of me saying what everyone was expecting, Labour.
Obviously, yeah. Labour is the party of fishing, apparently.
Yeah, we all know that.
Strong
they're
and stable
desperately
fishing.
for every vote that they can get. No, I think the Conservatives have run a campaign focused on general deregulation of farming and fishing, and not wanting to blow my own horn like some kind of nutter. I've got a small amount of experience in agricultural policy myself, so I think we'll generally perform quite well with farmers.
Yep, and another thing, just before we can go to South Scotland, the results there. We're just discussing the candidate, the SNP candidate for that constituency. He's been quite inflammatory. How do you think that will affect the SNP's result there?
Oh well, politics often does get quite dirty, and I think we've had quite a lot of that in the recent years. And I wouldn't be surprised if people are quite sick of it, to be honest.
I'm afraid you shall have to leave it there because we understand that the returning officer is ready to declare for South Scotland. We will now take you to the returning officer.
I hereby give notice that the votes are as follows. Scottish Radical Party, UUK, 4,754. Scottish Greens, LE116, 39,705. Scottish National Party, Fiaccara, 23,537. Scottish Labour, prep for this, 22,482. Scottish Liberal Democrats, Vacadia, 16,437. Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, Rory, 125,705. Scottish Unionists, MCR 3257, 106,520. I hereby give notice that Rory is duly elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for South Scotland.
Well, Rory, you've confirmed your prediction.
Woohoo!
With a very strong and stable majority there of just under 20,000.
Yep. And as we see, the SNP again aren't doing as well. They're not doing very well tonight, are they?
You want to talk about not doing very well? The poor Scottishman is the RSP. Let us all spend a moment and think of those poor people.
Moment silence.
Those poor manifesto-less people. Yeah, let's have a moment to think about them. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
God
But
bless.
yeah, I've got to admit, I'm quite disappointed that despite the fact that they have done nothing, all I saw was the RSP candidate for South Scotland making a small comment during the debate. So, but despite this, they still might actually win a list seat. So it's a bit disappointing, to be honest.
Well, there is always going to be a group of hard support for a party who will vote for that party come rain, shine. Yeah, I think you just have to accept that no matter how badly a party does in the election campaign, there will always be some people who have tied their flag to that party and will never leave it, and that is quite possibly what we're seeing propping up probably at the SUP here. Although it is very not the SUP. My apologies. The Scottish Radical Party, slightly different parties, ever so slightly different. I mean. It is questionable as to whether they'll manage to secure a list seat, though. We'll just have to wait and see. You have to remember, though, that they were coasting on a lot of support from the last general election, and that does influence people to a degree in these sort of midterm elections.
Yeah, but you've got to ask. You're saying that sure you might run a bad campaign, but you've got core support. But I think there's a clear difference between a bad campaign and a non-existent campaign. And
Can't mess up the campaign if you don't have one, though.
but if you're unwilling to put in that effort, you've got to ask yourself: are they willing to put in the effort if they're elected? And I think seeing the result that we've just seen in South Scotland, the answer is the people of Scotland don't seem to agree with that.
Yep, that is something, yeah, which is quite notable in this election, the SRP's absence. And the NPS, we haven't discussed them yet. Highlands and Islands, I believe, they were pulled to be highest. The Liberal Democrats are doing quite well across the board. Is that potentially a seat that the Lib Dems could pick up?
They have been very persistent.
Yeah, well, I was seeing that because the Lib Dems performed very well in mid-Scotland, much better than expected. And I think that if they get the same kind of boost, they are a real candidate for Highlands and Islands, which would be a big blow to the left in Scotland.
Yes, Highlands and Islands is interesting. That's predicted to be the final seat to declare for this evening. Highlands and Islands was originally predicted to be a narrow but reasonably comfortable win for the National Party of Scotland. However, that was before the other parties produced a manifesto and they didn't. So we could well see the Lib Dems taking their place. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. I think it might be the last seat, but we never know. It could actually be the one that decides everything. It could decide what wing the next government comes from.
Yeah, and the Liberal Democrat Conservative tension over federalisation is obviously a key thing for both of those parties. Rory, do you think the Conservatives could potentially have a supply and confidence with the Liberal Democrats, or Labour potentially a better option for them?
Right now, I don't think it's the time for speculation of this sort. You need to wait until we see the complete layout of Holyrood before you can start talking about potential coalitions.
Yep, I think that is perfectly reasonable. And I think the next result we are getting
will be Central Scotland. They
Ooh.
they are predicted to be the next ones to return.
And that's the SUP Green Marginal, isn't it?
Yes, that should be a very interesting one to see. Perhaps even a sign of what kind of government Scotland can expect.
Absolutely.
It's a highly polarising seat because you can't really have two parties that are more opposed than the Greens and the SUP. I mean, I do wonder whether we'll see a degree of tactical voting with the UNIS going, oh, we can't let the Greens win, but I don't like the SUP very much, but I'll vote for them.
Yeah, well, if we look at polling from the 28th, the SUP are on 29.5, whereas the Greens are on 21.5. That's their leader's seat, obviously. So the SNP, if the Greens, apologies, if
who
they
can tell the difference?
If they don't win that seat, and if they don't win that seat and they don't get a list seat, their leader will not be an MSP. That's something
If
very
only.
key to look out for.
Oh, that would be lovely.
You're being very partisan.
What do you expect?
Oh, you're very mean. You should be nicer. Don't be mean.
I'm
Be
sorry,
kind to the
Greens.
Greens.
I'm sorry.
Congratulations, though, Rory. I think you're the first candidate we've had on who's won their seat. So congratulations for that.
If we can bring in Indigo Rolo, there seems to be quite a strong showing for the Conservatives so far. Out of the 5 seats declared, they've claimed 3. Do you think that the Conservatives will have, as it were, the best mandate to form a government?
I think Holyrood has different procedures and rules to Westminster. So Westminster, it's very much, if you have a plurality, the culture is that you have the first chance to seek to govern. But at Holyrood, you elect a first minister. So, I mean, it's very, very possible for other parties to shut out the Conservatives. But I think that will be a very interesting election, and we can only wait and see.
Yep, and I think we can add in introduce our MBBC's senior political analyst, Red Omega. Can you hear us?
Hello, hi, how's it going?
Good,
Good evening. Thank you for joining us in the studio.
All right, so yeah, I've been focusing on Central Scotland in my research, and it is definitely a really polarised and interesting constituency. That's something that I've noticed.
What are your thoughts? You've been analysing. Which way do you think it will go?
I think that it's probably going to go Greens, mostly due to the performance in the constituency debate of the SUP, because Britboy, the SUP candidate, went a bit off the rails in a lot of his approaches to social issues.
You think that could scare off the sort of marginal voters?
I think so. Any conservative tactical voters or any voters like that could end up being scared away by
not a happy night for them, is it?
Nope.
And at this point, I think we have to thank Rory for joining us on the stream, and congratulations again.
It's been very nice to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So I think we can,
yes, I can now confirm that we have results incoming. Central Scotland is about to declare. We will now take you to the returning officer.
Cast as follows: Alave 3, Scottish Radical Party 8,203, MG 9,500, 9,500, 90,099 Scottish Greens. Scottish Labour, I am Jamie P, 44,243. Scottish Liberal Democrats, Figgy Stardust, 13,923. Scottish Conservative and Unionist, Pineapple Crusher, 53,954. Scottish Unionist, Britboy 3456, has 75,635. I can therefore give notice that MG 9,500 is duly elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for Central Scotland.
And we can see that that the Greens have indeed taken it. We can see a very strong showing from the Conservatives, quite possibly splitting the vote.
Yeah, this has definitely been one of the more interesting results of the night, and this is how I predicted it would happen, but polling didn't show it going this way. And of course, this shows the Scottish Greens leader winning, which eliminates all concerns of them not getting a seat for their leader. So this is definitely going to be a very sort of it's going to be a very seismic result for the evening, because it could mean that the Greens have the same amount of seats as the Conservatives.
Yeah, something I'd just like to add there: if Pineapple Crusher has done so well, then that could definitely put them in the position for a list. Lothian's going to be the result of the night, I think, in terms of the next Parliament.
Yes, we're seeing a very strong comeback from the Greens, who are also predicted to take the next seat that's expected to declare Lothian, which is understood to be very close.
Yeah, I think that Lothian will be really interesting, and we know that probably the Highlands are going to go for the Liberal Democrats, so that's not too much of a factor. But Lothian is definitely going to be the deciding seat of the night, I'd say.
I think it will. I mean, it's probably very close there. I mean, polling showed that quite dramatically. And it's Slug there, Purple Slug, the ex-Lord Speaker, obviously, and Dan Folk, Electoral Folk, apologies. So two really strong candidates, with the Conservatives having big figures there. Speaking the Prime Minister, for example, is it something that the Conservatives need to win to become the next to have their leader as the next First Minister?
Well, I'd say that winning it would definitely give them the next First Minister, because it would put them on 4 seats, and I think most people at this point have been predicting them to 3. So I think that I do think, though, that the Greens have had a very good night. They've been overperforming in a lot of constituencies, and of course they managed to take Central Scotland, which they were polling 8% behind in. So I think that the Greens will probably take Lothian, but it could, if the Tories do win it, then I'd say that that's who the next First Minister will be. It'll be Leachy.
Yeah, it's very interesting indeed. And I believe this individual who was due to be discussing Lothian specifically is unable to make it. That was the director of MBBC2. Unfortunately, I believe he's ill this evening. So we will continue with Red Omega, our political analyst, who can take us through the Lothian results when they come in. We're not exactly sure when, within the next 10-15 minutes or so.
Right, I'm
Yes,
happy to stay on.
I can update you. We have just found out that Lothian has also gone to a recount with a very close face-off between the Greens and the Conservatives. In fact, as I say, it's so close that they have decided to give it a second counting just to make sure they've got it right.
Yeah, and I'm just, and we'll have a bit of time now to discuss other things, and just checking Twitter there. The Greens leader, he's making a speech in East Kilbride where they were counting the results for Central Scotland, so they'll obviously be very happy with that, and bordering Glasgow. Such a result for the Green Party thus far, and obviously Lothian to come shortly after the recount, is it potentially an opportunity for the Greens to try for a second independent referendum?
I think it could be. There's definitely been a very strong nationalist showing in that the Greens are going to take quite a few seats, and I'd say that we'll see a couple of list seats go to the SNP and the SRP, and this could definitely be calls for a nationalist government in Holyrood, which no one has really been predicting.
I don't think so. The Conservatives have had quite a strong night. I think where they've fallen down is the parties that were due to be supporting them, probably. Although we haven't seen the list seats, so potentially the Classical Liberals could pick up a couple. I'm just noting how well they've done in Glasgow and all the previous results where they weren't predicted to do very well. Coming in third here, fourth in other places where they were due to come fifth or sixth, perhaps. So if that does lead them for a list seat, particularly if Lothian doesn't go their way, they'll then have 4 seats overall. How would you view this result for the Conservatives thus far, Jack?
I think it's been a very good result for the Conservatives. There were certainly doubts over whether they'd take North East Scotland, and lots of their constituencies, they have drastically increased how much vote they have. So I think that it's definitely been a good night for the Conservatives. There's still a potential that they could take another seat, and I think that for the party itself, it's been a very good night among the Unionists. But let's see if it's a good night for unionism as a whole.
Yeah, and the Scottish Conservatives have obviously been playing on this message of sort of social liberalism whilst being fiscally conservative and pro-union. Is that position something that the Scottish electorate would sort of lean towards, the sort of social liberalism? Is Scotland potentially more socially liberal than the UK, and is that why the Scottish Conservatives have gone with that approach, Jack?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think that this has been, for the left wing especially, the fact that there are very few left-wing unionist parties means that Scotland has been able to, the Conservatives have been able to take a lot of the vote. And I think that their approach to this election is serving them very well, because they're taking votes from all across the aisle. Now, there is a bit of a concern because the classical Liberals are taking a very similar approach to them, and they have managed to force the Liberal Democrats to take a more federalist approach, which could be very interesting, actually, when it comes to executive formation, because we don't know whether the Liberal Democrats are more likely to go with Unionists or with Nationalists, but we'll have to see. I'd say they're more likely to go Unionist, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating the way the results have turned out tonight. And the SNP not doing as well as expected has obviously been a huge factor as well. Lothian's where we are going to next after when the recount is completed. So if you look at how the SNP were doing in Lothian, they weren't doing too well, only at 9.4%. Will their voters turn out and vote Green to push off the Conservatives there?
Yes, I think tonight we may see some more tactical voting. I mean, clearly that you can see with Central Scotland, that could have been a very different result if it were for tactical voting, because you see the right-wing vote being split between Britboy and Pineapple Crusher. Collectively, they would have had easily enough to topple the Green majority.
Yeah, and I think perhaps maybe one reason why the SUP and Conservatives haven't done these sorts of electoral coalitions or groupings is because of the sort of social liberalism that's been coming from the Conservatives, potentially taking some Labour votes. If we look at Lothian, though, the SUP and classical liberals are on 10.1%, and the SUP are on 4.7% polling. If they were to combine together and vote for the Conservatives, and the SNP were to go with the Green Party, then the Conservatives would still topple them. So will classical liberals have turned out for the Conservatives in Lothian, do you think, Jack?
I think that they might, because it is it's definitely one of the big seismic results. It's one of those constituencies that people are very worried about going one way or the other. So I'd say that there will be a huge element of tactical voting where we'll see lots of unionist voters voting for Conservatives and lots of nationalists voting for the Greens. It just depends who gets more of these tactical votes. And I think that the result is probably, it's closer than we've expected. So I think that could mean a very good thing for the Conservatives if we're going to a recount.
Yeah, it does. The Liberal Democrats, then, they've slightly surpassed expectations, but not to a dramatic extent. The Highlands and Islands obviously follows the Lothian result after that recount. The NPS haven't submitted a manifesto, haven't turned up to debates. Will they take the Highlands and Islands, and will they be the compromise candidate for First Minister, Jack?
100%. I'd say that Liberal Democrats have got the Highlands and Islands in the bag. They've got no serious competition there, and it's the demolition of the National Party of Scotland is definitely going to be a huge thing for them in the Highlands.
I'm afraid I must stop you there. We have results that are coming in from Lothian right now. I'm sorry for interrupting you. We will now take you to the not presiding officer, not quite yet, the returning officer.
I hereby give notice that the votes cast are as follows. Madcap, Scottish Radical Party, 13,311. Daring Philosopher, Scottish National Party, 23,947. Electrofolk, Scottish Greens, 98,316. Chapotato, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 37,224. Ray 124768, Scottish Labour, 34,745. Ila Abra, Classical Liberals, 28,187. Scottish Conservative and Unionist, Purple Slug, 90,429. Kaboka, Scottish Unionists, 14,032. I thereby give notice that Electrofolk is hereby duly elected as the Member of Scottish Parliament for Lothian.
So we see a very, very close result indeed. With another Green seat, they are now as large as the Conservatives. So I think we shall see a very strong Green showing in this coming Holyrood Assembly.
Yeah, I'd say that this has definitely thrown a lot up in the air now that the Greens have taken it. So it really depends how the Tories do on the list. If they can manage to win a list seat, which I doubt they will, then they could get ahead. But this Green showing is going to be extremely challenging.
Well, I think the Conservatives potentially now do have a good chance of getting a list seat. They've polled extremely highly and above expectations in West Scotland, for example. And now not taking Lothian will, particularly using the Hunt method, which we're using for the list system, could definitely leave them with a list seat, which would put them on 4.
Just to interrupt you there,
of course.
The election has, since the Westminster election was changed last time, it's done by St. Lag. So the result is it's always the most underrepresented party that gets the seat given. So that'll lead to, I think, a more divided parliament, because you're less likely to see larger parties getting that edge over smaller parties for the final seat.
Apologies about that then. I believed it was De Hunt, but that's incorrect. But I now think we can bring in Victory Knight, who is the Scottish Conservative and Unionist candidate for the Highlands and Islands. He is also the deputy leader. Can you hear us then, Victory Knight?
Yeah, I can hear.
Good evening, Victor.
Apologies. Good evening.
Well, this is clearly not the result the Conservatives were hoping for in Lothian. A very narrow defeat by the Greens of around just under 8,000 votes. Does this change the position of the Conservatives at all?
Not at all. I think we've done very, very well in the constituency. Obviously, we haven't won that constituency, but we were polling behind from the beginning. I'm very pleased with the result, and I think now we could possibly see a Conservative list seat, which we were not expecting to see before.
It is possible, although I must, to help the viewers in case some of them aren't familiar, the more first-past-the-post seats are secured, the harder it is and the more votes that are required to secure a further list seat. The Conservatives have done quite well on first-past-the-post constituencies. So we should just have to wait and see.
Well, I suppose that I was totally unaware of that, and perhaps my analysis has been knocked off.
Yes, the idea is though that the list is there so that voters who do not manage to get a first-past-the-post representative, their votes are then taken and put onto the list, and the more first-past-the-post seats that are gained by a party, the more votes they would need to secure a further list seat, which is so that the system becomes proportional. And say, for example, in Lothian, it allows parties like, let's say, the Liberal Democrats to get representation despite their voters not managing to show as strong a vote as the Greens did.
I think even still, when we look at the method used, I think the classical Liberals will get a list seat. I think the Lib Dems will get a list seat. So will Labour. The SUP obviously could potentially be looking at 2 after probably not getting any FPTPs. Does that leave a space in there for the Conservatives? They have pulled highly, and if it does, that could also change to the 7th or 6th list seat. If that goes Conservative, that could change First Minister.
Could I make a comment, please?
Of course, yeah.
Well, I think that Twisted Nuke's analysis is, I thank him for patronising me, but I believe that there is still a route for the Conservatives in this election. I mean, the National Unionist Party are obviously a party which we are, fairly close to, and they, in many constituencies, have received fewer votes. I think that with National Unionists showing on the list, we could still see Leachy as First Minister, later in the week.
Yeah, and if it wasn't a Leach First Minister, for example, who would we be looking at? Would we be looking at the Green leader then, I think, would you say, Victory Knight?
Well, I'm honestly not sure. I'm sure it's your job to be doing, this sort of analysis. I'm here to talk about the Conservative performance, and obviously, if it doesn't play up, I'll let you know. But I think I'll leave it to the BBC analysis team to discuss how the Greens will be doing.
Absolutely. So the Conservatives, let's talk more about them. The seat that you're contesting, the Highlands and Islands, how do you think the campaign's gone there?
I think that we've ran a very positive campaign in the Highlands. I have a lot of connection to that constituency. My family have lived there for generations. In fact, I still reside there in our ancestral estate today. I think that going round, people have been very excited to see a local man contest a local constituency, unlike the other, members, which I understand have come down from England.
Yeah, I mean, so who do you predict will win the Highlands and Islands yourself then?
Well, I believe that the National Unionists have performed very well. Of course, I would like to see myself return, but I don't think it's realistic, given the national outlook so far. I believe that, it could be the Liberal Democrats, it could be Lord Wagbo, he could be returned. Someone I'm very, very I find to be very, very likeable. I think it's probably going to be the Liberal Democrats, but I would like to see Lord Wagbo perform in that constituency.
Yeah. And looking ahead, after the Highlands and Highlands result, we obviously have the list results. Who would you say are going to do well in the list? The anarcho-primitivists, bizarrely, we haven't discussed them thus far.
Oh,
They're an
geez.
independent grouping.
I
Sorry?
think that's because they're not a party. I mean, it's totally they've formed at the last minute, and if they win a seat, I think it's an absolute joke, and it would show that the electoral system is fundamentally flawed. And I think the people of Scotland overall would be asking questions.
Now, something I think that we need to address about the anarcho-primitivists is that the polling we've done, there hasn't been any Raven-based polling. It mostly is telephone and internet-based polling. So the poll of the anarcho-primitivists that we're seeing is going to be not very representative of their core demographics. So there could be this whole section of untapped voters that are unable to be polled.
And unable to breed.
That's absolutely true. How do you see the anarcho-primitivist candidate doing in Highlands and Islands and Victory Night? Do you think that they could not come last? To be nice.
Oh no, I sincerely doubt they'll keep their deposit. I mean, as I've said, I don't think people in the Highlands are into anarchism. I don't think the people of Scotland are into anarchism. The only way I could see them possibly squeezing into the Scottish Parliament is through the list seat. And if it is through the list seats, I believe it acts itself as an insult to the electoral system. And I think the people of Scotland will be very disappointed.
But if they secure enough votes to get a list seat, then surely it doesn't matter what the party is. If enough people have voted for it to earn a list seat, then surely it's not for us to judge.
Well, as you say, it's to do with representing, more unrepresented parties. But I mean, I think it's almost as if voting for the monster raving loony party. I mean, I don't see these people as particularly serious, and I judge, I would question the intelligence of anyone who would vote for an anarchist. I would think that I wouldn't like to say stupid, but I think something to that effect.
Now, would the anarcho-primitivists securing a victory, would that be a sign that the system is rotten to its core, that enough people feel that they should protest and vote for the anarcho-primitivists? Because that's the only scenario that I can see them securing anything in.
I don't think so. No, I think it's mostly, loony 17-year-olds. I don't think that this is in middle Scotland where people are, going out to work, paying their taxes. I don't believe that this is a view that is commonly held. I think that it'll be mostly, edgy 17-year-olds who want to, maybe stir up a bit of trouble. But I don't think that this is a serious view which is held by ordinary working Scots.
Now, these be the edgy 17-year-olds that are constantly glued to their smartphones. I don't see the young demographic going for them. I see it as a protest vote.
These would be the edgy 17-year-olds like myself. I think I understand this demographic very well, being an edgy 17-year-old myself.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, if that's not first-hand experience, I don't know what is. And now I can now inform us that the Highlands and Islands are ready to declare. It's taken a lot of counting. There's a lot of distance for the poor six formers to run across, but the Highlands and Islands will soon be declaring. We will now take you to the returning officer.
Give notice that the votes cast are as follows. Scottish Green Party, Disclosed Oak, 43,339. Scottish Labour, Brilliant Alec, 11,421. Scottish Liberal Democrats, Nutter for Hire, 87,580. Scottish Conservative and Unionist, Victory Night, 65,902. Scottish Unionists, Lord Wagbo, 33,136. National Party of Scotland, Zoto 888, 36,157. Anarcho-Primitivists, Branchman 577, 12,429. I therefore give formal notice that Nutter for Hire is duly elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for Highlands and Islands.
Well,
Well-
yes, we see the Liberal Democrats have taken Highland and Island. Victory Night, I'm sure this is a bit of a knock to your ego.
Well, no, I would question the validity of the result. I mean, when I was walking around the constituency, people said, Nutter for Hire has come up from England, and they were very excited to see a local man standing. I mean, as I've already mentioned, my family have lived here for 12 generations. I am the 12th in line, and I live here in my ancestral home. I think Nutter for Hire, obviously congratulations to him, but I think there will be questions asked by myself and my campaign team as the evening goes on.
So, are you saying that the electorate was wrong, or that there was fiddling with the votes?
Well, no, I'm saying exactly what I'm saying. I'd rather you didn't put words into my mouth. I'm saying that there are questions to be asked. What questions those are not for me to say.
But you said you questioned the validity of the result.
Well,
What
of
exactly
course
do you
I
mean by
question the validity of the result, but there are many aspects in which the validity could be questioned. And of course, I'm saying there are questions to be asked about the validity of the result, but it doesn't necessarily imply that any particular question will be asked about the result. Certainly not by myself personally.
I think the real story of this constituency is the fact that the classical Liberals endorsing the Liberal Democrats has probably been the deciding factor in this election.
Absolutely. I mean, and the NPS not doing nearly as good as was polled.
No, but they also had the Scottish National Party standing aside in favour of them. So
yeah, so
it's
It's
interesting.
Now, talking about these results, saying these are the biggest stories of the constituency, is obviously ignoring the fact that the anarcho-primitivist groupings secured more votes than Labour did.
Yes, it has not been a good night for Brilliant Alec.
Absolutely not.
I would say he could tweet about how upset he is, but I'm afraid that's now banned. I, for one, welcome our anarcho-primitivist overlords.
Too,
All praise be to trees.
Yeah.
Technology is heresy.
I think another thing which we can take from this result is how good Victory Night has done. I mean, we're completely neglecting the fact he did come second when he wasn't polled to be anywhere near there. It was only 22,000 seats in it, votes rather in it, and that could put the Conservatives in a very good position for a list seat. Now, that would change Holyrood. What do you think about that, Victory Night?
Well, of course, I think I've performed well. I mean, the new National Unionists, when I was speaking to them, thought they would actually win this constituency, and obviously I've come second, and they've come. I can't remember. Was it third? I'm very pleased, and I think that we could be in line for a list. I am second on the list, and with Leachy winning in Mid Scotland in 5, I would be the first person to take that list seat. And of course, I'd be delighted if that were the case. And I believe it becomes more possible with the results that we've seen tonight.
Can we receive confirmation on that? If a large party does do particularly well in a constituency where they weren't polling to do well, will that increase their chances? Indigo Rule, you're our election method expert.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please? I was following a Twitter conversation debating the anarcho-primitivists' relationship with those ravens.
You're clearly answering the real questions of the evening. The original question was asking, essentially, can the Conservatives gain a list seat from this? Is it possible?
I wouldn't rule it out. I think it's going to be very, very close, whether they do get a list seat or not. The Liberal Democrats are certainly going to get a list seat. Labour certainly. I don't think the Greens will. I think their performance in constituencies has actually put them above the seats that proportionally they deserve, you could argue. So I think they have benefited from their strategy in central Scotland. Scottish National Party, they will get list seats. I think it will be a toss-up between the classical Liberals, Scottish National Party and the Conservatives on who would get an extra list seat. I don't know. So the list votes will be very interesting. So,
and on that note, our team of calculators have informed us they are ready to predict the list seat.
Okay, one moment. Can we just thank Victory Knight for joining us and introduce our next candidate?
Could I just say something before
No,
I go?
I'm
Just
afraid
very quickly.
there really isn't any time. I'm very
British
sorry.
regiment,
Okay.
I'm British Army, I'm British forever. I will never change.
Well then. I'm not sure if he's being dragged out of the studio right now.
I think a moderator has told him that it's time that he leave.
It's time he goes home and have a sit down. I think he's got very excited. Yes, so we are now able to declare the list seats results for Scotland. The list seats are now shown. And we can see now at the bottom that the final results, and of course on the left, we can see the list seats. The bottom now has the final results. We can see that the Scottish Unionists have picked up 2 list seats. The Classical Liberals have picked up 1. The Scottish Conservatives have picked up 1, as has Labour, Liberal Democrats, the SNP, and the Radicals. The final composition, there appears to be some slight errors in the ticker below. The final composition shows the Conservatives have done very well, taking 4 seats. The Classical Liberals have only received 1. The Greens have failed to receive a further list seat, leading them at their free first past the post. Labour have picked up a further seat, which has left them with 2 seats in total. The Liberal Democrats have also picked up a further seat, leaving them at 2. The SNP have claimed 1. The SRP have claimed 1, and the SUP have claimed 2 in total. So it's interesting. The SRP, despite their difficulties in continual low polling, have succeeded in taking a seat.
I think really that just shows that the system is unfair.
I think there's. I think we can just add in our next guest though to discuss these list results. We've got one with Sergio back with us, and we'll just get him into the studio right now. One with Sergio, can you hear us? One with Sergio.
Apparently not.
Okay, and we have another guest who we can potentially bring in. What's up, double?
Oh, looks like Leachy is gone.
And we've lost Leachy. That's not good. Well, this clearly hasn't been the way the Classical Liberals were hoping the evening would go.
Edinburgh, we have a problem.
At the beginning of the evening, Classical Liberals were hoping they might even win a first past the post seat. It's clearly not been quite the outcome they were hoping for. If you believe the ticker below, they've got 0, but that's clearly fake news. Looks perhaps Dunks will be taking up that list seat. I'm not quite sure who's in the pecking order. But a very strong showing for the Conservatives.
100% sure. Yeah, and I think we have What's Up 88, the Green candidate from Mid Scotland and Fife, to further discuss that with us. What's Up 88, can you hear us?
No, these technical issues. We've got gremlins all over the place. This is your license fee being spent. Well, yes, I think the real story we need to discuss is that the anarcho-primitivists have failed to declare any seats. I am very sad about that. I was hoping for a smartphone-free future for Scotland.
They did vastly overperform their predictions, though.
They did do very well.
And I think that definitely hits on my my theory about the hidden demographic of people who can't be pulled.
So it's surprising also, I think the Examiner was predicting they would even contend the First Ministership. So this has really let down a significant demographic of Scotland.
Yeah, and I think we can maybe discuss that now. The First Ministership, we obviously have all the results. And What's Up 88, I think you can join us now, can you? What's Up 88?
Hello.
Excellent.
Hello, thank you for joining us.
Not a problem.
Okay.
So what's your take on the situation?
Well, obviously I'm very, very happy that there's been a surge of Green support in what we're calling the Green Belt of Scotland in the middle. I'm very happy to see that. I'm sad that we didn't get any list seats, but surely we polled very highly with the first past the post, so that really helped. I just think it's been a great night for us, the Greens. I'm obviously not as happy that the Tories took the seats they did, but I'm happy with our performance, and I would just like to say that Electro folk, right, I'm really, really pleased with his result also. Like, well done to him.
That's the Lothian candidate, Green candidate now, Green MSP.
That would be him.
Would indeed. And so, what's up, 008? Do you think that there's no viable chance of a perhaps a Green-led coalition?
I would, well, obviously, because we've taken the number of seats we did, I'm really hoping that there would be a Green-led coalition. I don't know who we would like to actually coalition with, really, but I think that we could lead a coalition in Holyrood.
Do you have an issue, though, with the fact the SNP have only picked up one seat throughout the whole of the night, and the SRP? Are they potentially your only options for coalitions? So 3 + 1 + 1 only gives you 5, and potentially not enough for a supply and confidence. Does that rule out the opportunity for a Green First Minister?
Well, as a party, we're open to talk to anybody, as long as they're reasonable people. So, literally, I think we could form a coalition probably with the Liberal Democrats maybe, and the Scottish National Party. That would probably take us over the threshold, wouldn't it?
That would put you up to 6 in total.
7, I believe.
7. Ah, yes. 7.
3
No,
for the
it'll be 6.
Greens. 3
Yeah,
for the
we
Greens.
can't count here. Sorry,
It's
we're
3
not
for the
able to
Greens.
list votes.
3 for the Greens. 1 for the SNP. 1 for the SRP. 2 for the
With the
Scottish.
SRP, yes.
Yes, with the SRP it takes 7 and 6 without them. That obviously isn't over the threshold, and you'd obviously need a supply and confidence deal for First Minister. Who in the world could you look to?
As First Minister?
No, for support for First Minister. Apologies.
I think the SRP and the SNP would be our first ports of call for that.
Yes, but you wouldn't. With them, you wouldn't have quite enough votes to secure it.
But if we talk to the Lib Dems, surely that would put us over the threshold.
No, that would not.
The Greens have secured 3 seats from the Liberal Democrats have 2. The SNP have 1, and the SRP have 1, which would put you at 7.
Yeah.
Perhaps, possibly Labour could drop you up, or maybe even the Classical Liberals if you could be very convincing.
I think.
Yeah. We're open to working with the Labour Party as well as SRP and the Lib Dems and the SNP, because we don't want to get involved in party politics. We want to actually govern with others for the for the rights of the Scottish and in the national interest of Scotland. And we feel that we need to do what we can with the tools we have to ensure that the greatest demographic in Scotland are represented.
So perhaps you could provide strong and stable leadership in Scottish national interest against a Tory-led coalition of chaos.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, it's interesting. And can I just confirm there hasn't been any overhangs tonight? Is that correct?
There has been an overhang, and I think it's to the benefit of the Scottish Radical Party, who I don't think would be in Parliament.
Good lord.
That.
Yes, we can now show the total votes.
Good.
The absolute total votes for all constituencies. The Scottish Conservatives had just over 600,000 votes. The Scottish Unionists had just under 375,000. Scottish Greens 370,000. Scottish Labour had around 250,000. Scottish Liberal Democrats 230,000. Scottish Nationals 200,000. The Classical Liberals 190,000. The Radicals had around 75,000. The National Party had 53,000. And the Anarcho-Primitivists had 12,500. A very sad result for them.
Yeah.
And
is there something that this could... Is this result for the Conservatives something that could infuriate them? I mean, they've almost doubled that of Scottish Unionists, for example. Is it potentially an opportunity which they'll try and seek for electoral change, because with almost double the seats of second place and only one more seats, is that potentially an option, do you think, for the Conservatives then, Jack?
I think we've lost him.
Sorry, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, apologies. What was the question?
It was regarding the fact that the Conservatives have done so well overall in terms of votes, almost doubling that of second place. Third place of the Greens, and they obviously only have 3 and Conservatives 4. Will the Scottish Conservatives try and push for electoral reform because how well they've done and not potentially represented as such?
Well, that's down to them. Historically, they've benefited from unbalanced electorates, but we could see. I'd have to have a look at the percentages of everything and how much they actually got in comparison to their seats and their popular vote in order to decide whether they'd be pushing for electoral reform in Holyrood. But I think that the result was definitely very good for them considering how many votes they got. But it is sort of not very proportional in that they got nearly twice as many votes as the Greens, but only 1 seat more.
But regardless, the Scottish Conservatives, even with questions about how well the electoral system has served them, they have done very well, managed to securing 3 first-past-the-post seats and still a further list seat, which is quite impressive.
I think it has been a good night for the Conservatives overall. With the list seat as well, and that potentially could dilute their claims for electoral reform. But now all parties will have to look for coalitions and first ministers. Indigo Rolo, who could you see as the next first minister, and what's the most likely coalition?
I think it's actually too close to tell because because of that overhang. There are 16 seats, and you could end up with a situation where it splits into 2 camps, 8 seats each. So you could reach an impasse, and I think the Scottish Parliament have about a month to elect a First Minister. If they fail to do that, then they have to call another election. So we may either see possibly a Green First Minister, a Scottish Conservative First Minister, or we may see a compromise candidate.
Yeah, indeed.
If there is no First Minister selected and it goes back to another election, what do you think the consequences could be for the stronger parties, the Conservatives and the Greens?
I think you could potentially see a polarization of the vote and perhaps more ruthless strategizing.
Perhaps a stronger tactical vote, because there was a Green seat which a split broad right vote could, if put together, could have well won.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Central Scotland's a prime example of that. But in terms of potential coalitions, we're looking at Conservatives on 4. They could potentially work with the Classical Liberals on 1, which is 5. Labour potential on 2, which is 7. The SUP 9. Even if this is supply and confidence, could the Conservatives, Classical Liberals, SUP, and Labour split into 1 camp, with the Classical Liberals, Greens, RSP, and SNP splitting into another camp, splitting it 9-7? Apologies.
I'd say that regardless, it's the Liberal Democrats who will be the kingmakers here, and it all depends how their federalist policy is received, whether it's more nationalist or more unionist. But we could well see the Liberal Democrats deciding who the next First Minister is.
Potentially. Well, not necessarily, because if you look at Labour's result, they could potentially look at, because they've been staunch unionists. VMK, we know, has been particularly supportive of the union throughout the campaign. They could potentially go into a coalition with the Conservatives and Classical Liberals propped up by the SUP,
but
and that would put them on 9.
The only Labour coalition that would happen, I'd say, would be a Tory, Classical Liberal, Labour, Liberal Democrat coalition, because I don't think that Labour are willing to work with the SUP in any circumstances. That's what I got from interviewing Vending Machine King.
Yeah, and although potentially a supply and confidence deal from the SUP where Labour would actually benefit from that, is that potentially an option?
It could be on the cards, but I'd say that the likelihood of of parties like the Classical Liberals and Labour working with the SUP is very small.
I think so. Yeah, it's a result which could potentially even lead to a second election. It is that close, particularly with that overhang there, which is just dropped in with the SRP. And that's another question. If the SRP don't take up their seat, we could see what would happen then, because their seat is a list vote and we couldn't have a by-election as such. What would happen then? Indigo Rulo as the election expert.
They would either eventually have to find somebody. I think they have a fairly long time before their seat just gets dissolved. But if they just don't turn up at all, eventually it will have to be dissolved by the presiding officer, whoever that is.
And how would that work?
I think the procedure is the presiding officer does activity reviews, and if they fail to turn up to enough votes, their seat is either vacated and given to somebody else in their party, but if it's an overhang, then it does just get dissolved. It's a fairly complicated system, so I think it would be up to the discretion of the presiding officer.
Indeed. And if the SRP were to dissolve, seat was dissolved in an activity check, as Indigo Rulo was explaining there, we would then see 15 seats, which is how the Parliament is, what we're expecting tonight. We would then see the options for a left-wing, potentially nationalist coalition dwindle, because they would rely so much on that SRP seat to prop them up over the line, because 3 Greens plus 1 SNP plus their only options then are to look to the Liberal Democrats, and that's 6 out of the 8 they would need, and the only option they could then go for are Labour, and Labour, obviously the staunch unionist parties at the moment. It's a really unique result, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of coalitioning discussions throughout the next week or so. What do you think will happen in terms of coalitions? What's up, 008?
Well, obviously, we need the SRP to take their seat up. Otherwise, our chances of a coalition kind of vanish.
What would be your plans if you are unable to secure the first ministership?
We'd obviously be in opposition, and we'd try and be a strong opposition that fights for the electorate that elected us.
With these results, does this temper your resolve for independence, seeing that so the independents backing parties haven't done fantastically?
Well, obviously, we're not pro independence as such. We're pro the people deciding what they want to do, and we're open to independence if that's what they want. But obviously, this is something that's divisive in Scotland, and this the result kind of tells you that they don't want independence at the moment. So we will work with the people of Scotland to deliver what Scotland wants in their national interest.
So there will be no Green-backed push for independence in this term?
Well, it's not for me to say one way or other, but we will fight for what the Scottish people want themselves.
I don't think that'd be the priority for the Greens anyway. I mean, they need to try and get a coalition in place to start with. And I think even if we do get a coalition agreement or even supplying confidence, we're then looking at a really cautious, weak and wobbly, I think one of the election, put it earlier, governments, because they will encompass such a wide range of views. So, for example, if the Conservatives do end up working with Labour, their fiscal policy could eventually go down the bin, whereas they just have to stand on social policy and unionism. The Greens, on the other hand, are potentially more successful, but they then have to look to work with Labour, who are staunchly unionist at the moment, and it's a really difficult position for any sort of coalition agreement. Yeah.
So yeah, that was just. I'd like to inquire further on what you said there, Wassop. So you said that the Greens now don't think that the Scottish people have granted the government a mandate for independence. So would the Greens still pursue another independence referendum?
I think we may have lost her.
Oh, sorry.
What's up?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can now.
Oh, sorry. Clearly, we will pursue. I can't tell you whether we would pursue another referendum. That's for the people that are in the Scottish Parliament to make that decision based on.
But personally, would the Greens push for another referendum?
I don't personally think would push for one, given the results tonight.
I can just confirm we've had clarification from the acting presiding officer that there will be 3 9-day cycles and a few extra anarchy days to get a first minister, and then after those 3 9 days, which 27 in total, there will then be an election. So there are 3 9-day cycles where parties have an opportunity to discuss coalition and to sort out supply and confidence deals. And then if nothing can be decided by that third vote, if it goes that far, then we would be looking at another election. Another election in 27 days. Is that something which is on the cards, Wassop?
Well, if we can't secure a agreement, then we would welcome another election, and then obviously we would hope that the Scottish people would put their faith in us, possibly take some the votes away from lesser popular parties, and hopefully give us a stronger mandate to enforce our manifesto.
Yep.
If there was another election, do you think you'd have to moderate your manifesto to try and attract sort of broader progressive voices?
Yes, I think there's scope for change in the manifesto. We now know what the Scottish electorate want, and we can now go back and decide as a party what we want to put forward to the Scottish people based on what we know through them voting, through them actually using their ability to vote for what they voted for. So yeah, obviously there's lessons to learn in terms of what we try to push forward as our agenda and how we can go forward from that.
Ultimately, though, I think that our performance this election has been fantastic. I don't think that we should really be talking about moderating yet, because you think we've still got 30 days until there's going to be another election. If there is going to be one, for all you know, we could end up forming a government in the next 9 days and nothing would change. And
Absolutely.
it would be a success.
Yeah.
And to get 3 seats in our inaugural election, when previously we've held very few seats in Scotland, is a fantastic achievement for the Green Party, as it is for the Scottish Conservatives to get 4 seats, considering that they're traditionally second. And really, I think no parties now at this stage, when we haven't definitely got another election, should be thinking about moderating or changing things or picking and pulling things out. We really have got to wait and see what goes on.
I think one with Sergio's absolutely right when he says that we could potentially have a First Minister settled in 9 days. It just depends how good the party's negotiation skills are. I'm not sure on the Green front who... it's difficult for the Greens, I think, because they would have to look to both the Labour and the Lib Dems.
I don't think that would be a problem, though. I think the Scottish Greens are open to anybody. If they're willing to be on board with our policies, if they're willing to match what we want from Scotland, then we're willing to coalition with anyone given those circumstances.
But the Greens are staunchly
make that perfectly clear.
Sergio, the Greens are staunchly pro-independence, and Labour have made it very clear this election, particularly their leader VMK, that they are fighting for the union. How are you going to get them on your side whatsoever when they have an opportunity with the Conservatives on on unionism and the social liberalism side that they're taking, LGBT rights, are you going to lose Labour to the centre right?
I don't think that's really the case, to be honest.
I think, to be fair though,
Depends
we're
direct democracy.
a party of choice for Scotland, of self-determination. We're not a party that's pushing some kind of referendum agenda. We're a party of choice. We want to give Scotland the choice of whether they want to be an independent country or not. We don't want to push the union, and we don't want to excessively push independence. We want to give the Scots the choice.
But if there's a second election, you'll be in a very sticky position, won't you? Because at the same time, you'll be trying to appeal to the voters who had gone for independence and for the ones who'd gone for unionism. If you want to improve your position, you're in a very sticky position for that if there is a second election.
These are all ifs and buts because we don't know what things are going to be like until we've passed this 27-day cycle. Should we pass that 27-day cycle, obviously it's something that all parties will have to look at. But until then, I think it's best that all parties.
I think we're having
we're having some technical issues with your line there. Where it's absolutely rotten line. So what's up? You get to talk some more. Lucky you.
Hooray! So
the people's favourite, clearly.
Basically, I just think that if we've got time to sit down with everybody to discuss what we want for Scotland, what they want for Scotland, and what the Scottish people voted for, and as my colleague said, we've got plenty of time to actually get something together for Scotland rather than going back to the drawing board, writing more manifestos, campaigning again, because obviously campaigning is not healthy for the country. We want to be able to make Scotland further the progressive nature of Scotland and make it a country that's great still, because we can do so much better in Scotland. It is a great country and we can still do better.
Yeah, and I think we've been particularly focusing on how well the Greens have done here. I think if we turn our attention to the Conservatives, very few people were predicting the Conservatives get 4, particularly with the list seat. What do you think about that? Were you expecting the Conservatives to do as well as they've done tonight?
Not at all, but obviously it shows that there is a strong unionist feeling in Scotland. But the other thing I'd like to add is that the whole independence debate is not everything with Scottish politics. There's education, there's health, and there's other things, other issues that are big issues, day-to-day issues that need to be talked about. You can't just because a party has a leaning towards either independence or union. Of course, that's going to influence who votes for them. But it's important to also realise that there are other issues on the table that need to be discussed. Day-to-day issues, as I said.
Yeah. And if the Greens were to get the position of First Minister, albeit probably in a weak position, what would be the first thing you'd look to do?
I think we've simply got to wait and see in that matter.
So you don't have a priority you want to do? A specific piece of legislation you want to pass?
We have a priorities in our manifesto, but simply at this stage we've just got to wait and see what coalitions form, and then if we're First Minister, we've simply got to look at our position then and our policies from our manifesto, and really, if we've weighed them up with our coalition partners, which we most certainly will have done by that point, if we are in First Minister, then we'll look at those, we'll take our policies from our manifesto, and we will look to implement them, look to make Scotland better.
Yeah, so it's still having some gremlins on the line there.
For all.
Yeah, but I think we are ready to wrap up the stream now, and thank you very much to What's Up, one with Sergio, Jack, Inferno Plato, apologies, Indigo Rulu. Thank you all very much for joining us here in the MBC studio. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much from MBBC here in Broadcasting House. Good night.